Well, good morning, loved ones. I thought I'd take a moment today and share with you a thought that I've been living with for it has to be almost a month now. I was listening to a teaching about a month ago of another pastor who was walking through the book of James, and specifically James chapter 3, the first few verses. Let me read the verses that we're dealing with, and then I will show you how, as I wrestled with his teaching, I thought, oh my gosh, though I've seen that, I've always missed it. I did have a takeaway from this passage, which was right and biblical, but it just seems like I missed and may have missed the larger takeaway. So, James chapter 3, I'm going to read verses 3 through 6. Now, if we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we direct their whole bodies. And consider ships, though very large, are driven by fierce winds. They are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So, though the tongue is a small part of the body, it boasts great things. Consider how a small fire sets ablaze a large forest. And the tongue is a fire. The tongue, a world of unrighteousness, is placed among our members. It stains the whole body, sets the course of life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. And to be honest, the way that I always processed this was, oh, be careful, little tongue, what you say. For the Father above is looking down with love, so be careful, little tongue, what you say, because the tongue is little. It boasts great deeds, and it does great and awesome, mostly awful things. But as this other pastor was teaching, he talked about how the bit in the horse's mouth directs the course that that very large beast follows, and how the rudder, a very small, by comparison to the entire ship, sets the course for the large ship. And then the verse 6 says, the tongue, a small thing which has set on fire, sets the course of life on fire. And it may be that I always looked and said, well, if you say a little something, it may be big in consequence. And what the author of James is saying is this: your little tongue will inevitably, if you're not in control of it, will take you to big consequences, bad consequences. If you keep it under wraps and you keep it under control, you're a perfect man in all ways, and so things go well. It is about direction of life, how we speak, the words that we say, the tone in which we say them will get us where it wants us to go, and that might not be where we want to go. The question is, when you get where you're going, are you where you want to be? And so this pastor kind of illustrated it this way. There's two men who are on a business trip. They work in the same office, and they're in a car and they're driving, and the driver is speaking to the passenger. And in the course of their conversation, which is light and which is filled with sports and with news of the day, there are a couple of times that one time he begins to make reference to a woman who works in their office, and he speaks about her desirability. He mentions her shapeliness. He objectifies her. And then a little bit later in the conversation, as they're driving down the road, he begins to bring up the topic of another co-worker who they labor with, and he speaks unflatteringly of this man in a way that the driver wouldn't want to be spoken of him, and in a way that the driver wouldn't want the man who's left in the office to know that he, as he's driving, is speaking negatively. A little gossip. And if we were to ask that fella who's driving on the business trip, what's being driven here? He'd say, well, the car's being driven. But the course of that man's life is being driven by the words that he speaks and the tenor in which he speaks them. And so it is wise for us to evaluate our language, the tenor of our speech, how we speak of others and to others. The question is it directing us? Is it moving us? Is it driving us in a direction where when we get there we'll be ashamed of ourselves? Or is it driving us, moving us to when we get where we're supposed to be, where the tongue is taking us, that the Father up above, who is looking down with love, would be proud of where we are and how we got there. Sometimes we can read the scripture and get it right and miss a little bit more that is there for us. So watch your language, loved ones, and have a wonderful week. We'll see you sometime soon. Bye-bye.